Ki te kaunihira o ngā roto no Rotorua hui. Good morning everyone and welcome to the first Community and District Development Committee meeting for 2025. Just a few notes, the meeting is being live streamed and I think I have our chair of the airport board waiting online for that matter, and I'm just awaiting Councillor Wang and Mayor Tapsell to come in online. If you just make sure your mobile phones are off. Councillors aim to take a break by 11, but hope to wrap this meeting up, in fact, by lunchtime today. Just because we are in a different room, just note the fire exits. But if we can get underway with Councillor Barker with a karakia, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tūtaua mai runga, tūtaua mai raro, tūtaua mai roto, tūtaua mai waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, haungie, huie, tākie.
Kia ora, Councillor Barker, for that, and welcome to the staff, our media and the members of the public who are attending the meeting today. So I do have an apology from Councillor Waru for lateness. Don't seem to have any other apologies from Zoomland, so can I have a mover to accept the apologies? Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, thank you, that is carried. Councillors, are there any declarations of interest for this morning? For the matters that are on the agenda this morning? No? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to advise out of courtesy to the Chair, when we go to, is it 7.2 regarding the short-term accommodations, I do have a query regarding an amendment because there is a recommendation, but I appreciate it's a staff report, so just giving you a heads up whether you want to deal with this now or at the time when we come to that item, to you.
I'll take it at that item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just out of courtesy to you. Thank you.
No declarations of interest then. Councillor Patterson?
Sorry, are we doing minor matters not on the agenda?
No, I'm just taking declarations of interest. Are there any declarations for matters that are on the agenda? No? Okay, so now there are no urgent items that are not on the agenda that I've been advised of, so I will take, are there any minor matters that are not on the agenda?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, just raising, I've been getting a lot of contacts from the Hamarana residents about the situation with freedom camping on our reserve out there. The most recent one was 2 days ago, saying that there are 24 of them out there at that time, and they sent me photographs as well. Now, I know we've got security patrolling those areas. Not sure if that's actually effective, but there is definitely a concern in that community that it's being abused.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patterson. Can I just encourage those users that have been affected or residents out there that they actually log a request for service through the council so that we can then keep a track of complaints that are coming in for that? I don't know if you want to make any comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this is the first time hearing of it as well, so if I would encourage all parties, including members of the public, lodge them with council, and if you feel the need, by all means, raise them directly with me as well, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. No other minor matters? Thank you. We will move on now. So if you want to bring up page 6 of your agenda, that is the minutes from the Community and District Development Committee meeting held on the 4th of December. Just asking for a mover and a seconder to confirm that the minutes are true and correct. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Thank you, Councillor Barker. There are no amendments, councillors, or no? I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, thank you. That is carried. Morena, Councillor Waru. We're moving on now to the first item that is on the agenda, which is on page 8. Sorry, I'll get my 12. Sorry, 12. Getting ahead of myself here. So we have the report, Emergency Housing Update, and I ask for a mover and a seconder that this report be received. Thank you, Councillor Barker. Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, thank you. That is carried. Morena, Steph, and nice to meet you, Laurel. I've seen you here at the CDD meeting before. So in your hands, Steph.
Morena councillors, and through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to introduce Laurel Barry. She is our team lead for planning and consenting, and she's going to provide an overview of the report today.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. Morena koutou katoa. As Steph said, I'm Laurel Barry, and I'm the team lead of the consenting team here at Council. Just providing an overview of the emergency housing update report. So on the 13th of January, we received 7 resource consent decisions in relation to the Apollo, Alpine, Tohutu, Geneva, Ascot, Lake Rotorua and Rotorua Vegas motels. So the decisions were made on the 13th of January, and council circulated those to submitters and all the interested parties on the 15th of January. That was done both electronically and posted on the council's website. So just to summarise, there's varying durations in relation to those consents. I just note that the Apollo Motel has ceased operations, and we have inspected that one. They are certainly returning to tourism, and they've also been sent the return to tourism letter. So at this point, we're dealing with 6 contracted emergency housing resource consents. I'd just like to make a correction in regards to the 15-day appeal period. That actually closed on Wednesday the 5th of February, but no appeals were received, and that was confirmed with the Environment Court as well. And just if we follow on through to the graph, so the MHUD, so the contracted housing dashboard, continues to show a downward trend. That graph just shows the number of households and the number of motels being used for contracted emergency housing. And there's a further graph there in relation to social home numbers as well. Just in terms of next steps, if I jump to that part, so monitoring of the contracted of emergency housing is ongoing, and that's undertaken through both formal and informal inspections. And so in addition to that, currently Council are also looking at scoping potential amendments for a miscellaneous plan change, just to improve definitions around tourist accommodation, backpackers, boarding houses, that sort of thing, which would provide a little bit more clarity on those definitions and clarity on how the district plan, I suppose, interprets those rules as well. So those changes, will be, the intention is that there will be a miscellaneous plan change, and further details will be provided once the scope of that is realised. Any questions at this point?
Thank you very much, Laurel, for that presentation. I think I heard the Zoom. Is there someone online now? Morena, Councillor Wang, are you now online? Yes, good morning, we can see you. Thank you. We're just on the emergency housing update, so I'm just taking questions on that paper now, Councillor Wang. So, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, thank you very much for your report. Good to see you, Laurel. Just got a few questions, if I may. It says here, council staff will need to monitor compliance on page 14. So how is that going to be done, and what reporting will be done to ensure adherence to the directions by the Commissioner?
So, thank you for your question. So monitoring is currently underway, as it was for the previous 10 at the time. So monitoring effectively takes place. We have formal monitoring following compliance reporting from MHUD every 3 months, plus informal inspections are carried out weekly as well. So that's all in an effort to meet the conditions of consent. So
Weekly?
Weekly, drive-bys.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yes.
Now, I note there is nothing mentioned in this report about the non-contracted providers who are still operating, which is still a concern to the community. So my understanding is that Astray Motel and Backpackers, Rotorua Downtown Backpackers, Bay Tree Lodge, Kiwi As Guest House have all been returned to tourism, so that's a tick in the right box, I believe. But what about the likes of Accolade Lodge, Apex on Fenton, Cactus Jacks, Gibson Court, Kerry's Motel, Rose Court, Victoria Lodge, that were host housing recipients of the MSD emergency special grants?
Councillor Patterson, I'm just not sure that it's appropriate for staff to talk about individual businesses in a public setting. I don't know if you want to just talk generically about what's happening in that space. Lorelle, I think she had mentioned the plan change that's coming, but I don't know if you can just talk a bit more generically rather than us talking about direct businesses.
Yeah, sure. I can talk generically about that, and I can talk about that from a consenting perspective. I suppose what you're asking is more in the compliance space, which I'm not over. But generally, just in terms of some of those ones that you mentioned, some of them are located in certain zones that could make the use of those sites permitted. So they're not necessarily uncontracted, or so those ones may require don't require a consent. Sorry, yeah. That's probably as far as I can talk about that, because again, I haven't been involved in the non-contracted ones. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for giving it a crack. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. We will have JP back at the next meeting, and we will have some further updates about this our housing plan and the continuum of all the different types of accommodation. So today was just an update on the emergency housing consent situation. So there will be an opportunity to ask those questions at a later date when we've got JP back at the table. Morning, Your Worship. I think I have you online now.
Good morning, everyone.
Just on the emergency housing update paper, so I'm just taking questions from councillors around that, or are there any further questions, councillors? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure who the best person to answer this might be. It's a sort of a question that goes back a little bit. Perhaps Mayor Tapsell might be able to answer this. In 2017, it was under Mayor Chadwick. The Vision 2030 was adopted by the council, and it said in page 12, we want to ensure housing in the district meets community needs, and both council and the community are concerned about current pressures on housing stock, housing affordability, and how we can support people into emergency and subsidised rental housing in the district. I mean, this whole emergency housing thing's been catastrophic, really, for Rotorua and its reputation. I'm wondering whether this was brought about as the planned implementation of Vision 2030.
I'm not sure that's appropriate, and I don't think the staff can answer that. We don't have Vision 2030. This council's been working really hard to resolve the emergency housing situation. I don't know whether Andrew or Your Worship wish to make any comment on that, but we did, as our own priorities for this council, set that we needed housing of all types, and obviously there was the Fenton Street reputation rebuild, and so this has been a piece of that work of trying to remedy what happened, and a lot of it came out of the post-COVID situation, or through the COVID situation, where it was necessary to find accommodation to be able to have people sheltering in lockdowns. So I think there's been a significant amount of work done. This is the final end piece, and I think it's good that we can see an end date now, and it's really heartening to see even Apollo have exited before the due date in which the consent was for them. So Andrew, I don't know if you want to make any comments as a CEO, Your Worship.
Just a brief comment to say, purpose of this paper is really to update on the consents. The consents were applied for by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. Council's role was to process those consents, not advocate for them or against them in any way. And so you're receiving an update on those consents and our the work we've done in our regulatory sense. So I'll just say that that's the narrow topic that we're prepared to speak about today.
I understand that. Mayor Tapsell, you were on the council back in 2017.
Thank Council. If you could just direct your questions through me, please. You wish only if you wish to comment, but otherwise I'm going to move on. I have other people that wish to ask questions.
I would like to make a comment later, but there's no need to respond to Robert's personal opinions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. So Councillor Patterson, followed by Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you for your indulgence. Sorry, there was one more question. Just looking at the graph, which is showing the, or should I say the table or the diagram, whatever you want to call it, that shows the various types of housing and the numbers under the heading Summary of Temporary Housing Use in Rotorua, numbers of 10. So where it says transitional housing motel, it says there's one. Am I to take it that that was the Boulevard Motel?
Yes, that's correct.
And how long is that contracted for? How long does that consent go for?
So that's not a, that's, I couldn't comment how long that's contracted for. That does have a resource consent for an indefinite period to operate as what's known as transitional housing.
Indefinite.
Well, as long, yes.
Right, thank you.
Yes.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair, thank you very much, Stephanie Laurel. Nice to have you here today. Could I just ask if you were able to comment, or perhaps the CE, on the days that I attended the resource consent hearing, there was some very emotional and heartfelt testimony by those that were opposed to the consents being reissued. And the Commissioner made some very pointed criticisms at times, verbally, about those that were certain agencies, KO being one, but others as well, that didn't seem to live up to their promises in terms of resource consents, i.e. meetings that were supposed to be held with local communities, you know, those closely affected. Whose responsibility was that to follow those through and make sure those were being adequately monitored and reporting if we didn't feel that there was, if those promises weren't being upheld?
So through the, are you talking about the community liaison group conditions?
Yes, yeah, but others as well. There were others as well.
So absolutely, Council's responsibility has been to monitor those consents, and we have undertaken monitoring of those conditions of consent. We can only, through the monitoring, a lot of what came through the hearing had not been voiced to Council before that, so it had not been voiced through complaints or any other mechanism. So yeah, it certainly is Council's responsibility to monitor those conditions. We did monitor those conditions on a frequent basis, and we were satisfied that in terms of the conditions of consent, that the consent holder had been adequately or inappropriately meeting those conditions of consent.
Thank you. So could I ask, do we accept the criticism by those that placed concerns before the Commissioner? Do we accept that they had a point, or are we saying, sorry, you're...
When you say...
Councillor O'Brien, are you asking staff member for their personal opinion? I'm not sure.
No, I'm asking quite how do we respond to the criticism that was presented at the Commissioner's hearings?
I think we've kind of moved on from that, given that we've got a Commissioner's decision.
Well,
So,
what I'm concerned about, Madam Chair, is if we weren't monitoring, if we weren't to the standard that was required, what improvements or changes are we making to make sure that we comply with the remaining sort?
I'm not sure if Nora...
I could perhaps just answer that. So, you know, through the Commissioner's decision, he's issued a series of conditions. The conditions are pretty much exactly the same as what we had for the previous 10 consents. So, I mean, he's obviously had to weigh up the community concerns, which are very real, with how those consents were operating, and he's come to a point where he's got a set of conditions that we have to monitor at this point. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Not particularly, but I appreciate it was probably a hard one for you. As I say, my concern is just to make sure that the criticisms that were placed before the Commissioner, that we can try and take some action to and see if we can improve on our process, that we do. Because when I was there, and there weren't too many other councillors, Councillor Brown was there, Councillor Patterson, there was a lot of very heartfelt and very emotional testimony put forward. So I just hope we take their lead on that and see if we can improve the process. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien, and I think Laurel has mentioned that they are still doing weekly inspections, so hopefully we're on top of the monitoring. Are there any other questions? If not, I'll take the Mayor's comment. No, Your Worship?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Look, I just really wanted to acknowledge the collective effort of the community, of the council, and of course of our local MP Todd McClay in finding an end to this. I know that this has been a significant challenge for us as a council coming in, having to focus on something that we had very little control over at the time. So we did start with the Rotorua housing plan, and we are also working with this new government to make sure that not only are we seeing the end to this finally, but also that we can assure that we are getting adequate builds, and especially of affordable housing. So I do want to acknowledge that the way out of this is actually ensuring that people have homes. There's no doubt that there's a cost of living crisis, and while unfortunately the ones making the headlines were the people who are taking advantage of the situation, there is a very real need, and we've seen that with our families and people of all ages who are finding themselves in housing distress. So as we conclude what has been a very harmful and frustrating few years for Rotorua, I am excited about what we have on the horizon, in particular with some of the great developments that are happening in our community, including those with local iwi, where we are seeing affordable housing and also affordable rentals being built. So I do acknowledge that from a council perspective, we've not only been ensuring that we are reducing the social issues and making sure that these motels are complying with their consents, but also been very supportive and have absolutely bucked the trend of downward development across the country when we've actually seen a record amount of consents here in Rotorua. And that just goes to show how hard this council has been working, both from an elected member perspective and a staff perspective, to solve this housing crisis that we're facing. So I just wanted to pass on my thanks to everyone who's helped to get us to this very positive situation where these consents will be ending, but also importantly, overall motels have ended by, motels have reduced by 80%, and that's fantastic for our community, and Rotorua is feeling really positive for our future, and we are too. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Tēnā koe me councils. So thank you very much. No further comments on that, councillors. Thank you very much, Steph and Laurel. So councillors, moving on now to page 18 of the agenda, which is the short-term accommodation working group establishment paper. So I'd ask for a mover and a seconder that the report be received. Thank you, Councillor Waru, seconded by Councillor Lee. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you, that is carried. So, morena, David, and welcome to your first Community and District Development Committee meeting as our new CFO.
Good morning, Madam Chair, good morning, committee members. So, as you will all remember, when we adopted the long-term plan on the 26th of June last year, we changed the business and economic development targeted rate to include elements of short-term accommodation. That was specifically targeted at providers of short-term accommodation who were making their properties available for more than 60 days within a financial year, and were also for an entire property. So just to be clear around what types of properties were included with that rate. And when we adopted that long-term plan, we also, the Council also resolved to create a working group to look at those policy settings for that rate, look at the data that was coming through in terms of any potential changes in the accommodation mix available in Rotorua, and make recommendations to any changes that may be, that working group may feel would be required. So I do have some information through Rotorua NZ that has to the end of January, just demonstrating how that new rate has impacted the availability of short-term accommodation in Rotorua, that I'll go through shortly, and I'm happy to take questions at the end of the presentation. So firstly, just important to note that when Council included the short-term accommodation rate, it also happened at the same time that Inland Revenue changed their policy settings around GST as well. So the numbers I'm about to show you reflect not only the impact of the rate, but also the impact of Inland Revenue instructing the likes of Airbnb and Book-a-Batch, those types of providers, to apply the GST Act more rigorously. So what we do see is that the seasonally booked listings in Rotorua have actually increased on last year. So despite those regulatory and policy changes, both from us and from the central government, the number of seasonally booked listings in Rotorua District to the end of January have increased. So, we'll continue to monitor that through the rest of the year, and we'll use this information with the working group to inform any kind of policy settings that may be required through the views of that working group. When we look a little more deeply behind those numbers, we can see some trends coming through. We can see that the number of listings has increased, that the occupancy has for January has remained relatively static. When we look at the entire year to date, the number of listings has increased, but the number of days that have been rented out have marginally decreased, or that number of the median days that those properties have been occupied have decreased. We can see that the actual charge per property per night, so that the average daily rate, the median average daily rate, has increased 8% from $272 last year to $293 this year. And so there has been a change in what those providers have been charging per night. And we can see that overall, on a median basis, obviously the annual revenue for some of those properties have been collected has decreased marginally as well. So I guess on balance, from taking a view to the end of January, although some of the policy settings locally and nationally have changed, the number of listings has increased, and the average daily rates of what those properties have been charging per night have increased. Just the occupancy has decreased a little over that period as well. So the purpose of you'll see in the paper, the purpose of this paper is to allow council to engage in the recruitment of that working group, to provide regular updates through the terms of reference that have been agreed, and I'm happy to take questions on the report or on the information we've provided on those trends to date.
Thank you very much, David, for that presentation. I do see Andrew Wilson and Justin sitting at the back there. I don't know, just from a Rotorua NZ perspective, if you have any quick comments that you want to make about how the summer's tracked with visitor numbers. Sorry to put you on the spot there, Andrew. We'll wait for you to.
There we go. Good morning. Probably just the main comment would be we've seen a pretty good summer period. So we have seen a lift in overall visitor numbers and visitor expenditure, which is really positive, largely driven by international visitors. I think domestic, with cost of living and so forth, has been pretty flat. But we have seen a really solid summer in terms of international visitors. It's come through in the other parts of the accommodation sector as well. So certainly when we look at the hotel results, they've seen a pretty good lift in terms of their ADR, which is the average daily room rate, and their RevPAR, which is revenue per available room. And we've certainly probably out-indexed a lot of the other kind of centres around the country as well in that respect, which is really encouraging.
Thanks for that comment, Andrew. I know that he wasn't expecting to present today, and we will have a full update from Rotorua NZ at the next CDD meeting next month, which by then will have collated all of the summer results. But thanks for that comment. Andrew, you wish to make a comment too?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just to put the paper in context, is we're getting some numbers, but as you can see from the trend line, they're incomplete. This is expected for this time of year. When the decision was made to review this after 2 years, but in no less than 3 years, it was with the view that we were going to have incomplete data at this point. And so we're just giving you an update at this point. It's incomplete, but as the working party gets up and running, we hope to be able to provide them with fuller data so that their recommendations back to council, for council to consider any policy changes in due course, are much more complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. So I'm happy to take questions at this time. I know, Councillor O'Brien, you've signalled that you have a question around the terms of reference, so I'll take that question now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do just have a couple of questions first, if is that okay? What would you
Sure.
prefer? First one, could I ask, thank you very much, David. Could I ask, what was the source for those figures? Is that independent study from us under RNZ, or have we got those from the STA community?
So those come from the AirDNA source. So they are an independent source that basically do a monitoring across all of the Airbnbs, nationally and internationally.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And my second question is, sorry, so it was an update, but we haven't seen any figures around what dollars that's brought in compared to what we lost from those that were a commercial. Will that be part of the AP process?
That would be part of the Working Party's data that would be provided to them, remembering that we haven't had a full financial year since this policy was brought into effect, and that was the purpose of having the committee set up, or the Terms of Reference Working Group set up, so that then they can work with both David and on the data. So by then we'll have had a full year of rating information, properties in and out, summer trends, and a whole year worth of trends in terms of where the data sat for the accommodation
Thank you, Madam
sector.
Chair. I appreciate that, but in terms of actual numbers by now, we would have the idea of who we're rating, how many, even if we're not talking dollars, surely we would have an idea now how many fit into each category, or how many that were paying full commercial rates previously have now dropped.
Through you, Madam Chair, when we talked about this rate last June when we adopted the LTP, we came in with evidence that there would be around 650 properties that would be included in this rate. We have refined the data to exclude probably around 200 that may have incorrectly ticked a box when they established their listing that were included in the original 60 days full property that we've been able to we've provided evidence that they shouldn't have been included in that information. So that brings it down to about 450 odd properties that we included in the rate. We also had about 100 properties who came in and signed a statutory declaration which declared that although they had previously conducted themselves in a way that would make them eligible for that rate, that they would remove themselves from that, they would cease business activity in order to be excluded from that short-term accommodation rate. Now what's important is that we are about to retest our annual our annual retest of the data to make sure that those properties who sign that statutory declaration have ceased, or will capture any new properties that have come into the mix, or anything that may have changed in the way that some of those properties may have changed the way they advertise or changed the number of days per calendar year. And we'll be able to provide an update to the working group as to when we come to relook at the rates for this coming June and July, how that may have changed compared to what we envisaged in the long-term plan.
Okay, thank you. So the information will be also available to councillors as well, I would hope?
Yeah, so this is just the first update that we've
Thank
had,
you.
and so remembering, as I said, we've still got information to come and data to be collated, so there will be more information to come, and it's proposed that there be a first report back to this committee from the Terms of Reference Working Group in July.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, moving to I'll call it an amendment, but I'll take advice from the Chair. So what my concern is that we're now mid-Feb. By the time, if we adopt this today, when do we start advertising? Probably by the end of the month. That'll be, 3 to 4 weeks approximately by the time that gets done. First meeting maybe, which will be a meet and greet in April. A couple more months, hopefully, if you have one more meeting to actually start the process underway, and then we go into caretaker status not so long, and then of course we're into the election period. Post-election, there could very well be a new mayor, changes to, or even no matter who the mayor is, there could be changes to this committee process. So what my recommendation would be, rather than the up to 9, my suggestion would be that we choose 3 from the STA community, 1 each from the other 2 groups, along with yourself as Chair, Madam Chair, see through for the rest of this triennium, and then a new process could begin after post-election.
So if you're asking the question of me, I think the paper does say up to, so it would be an excuse me, expressions of interest, so we don't have to fill all the positions, so it could be less, and so there was some numbers put in the paper that also came out as a recommendation from the long-term plan discussion as to
Well,
how
I'm quite happy with that, but I would like to record 3/1/1. So up to for me is a little bit airy-fairy, blah, blah, blah. I deal in specifics. So for me, it would be 3/1/1 and yourself as Chair. And then after the election, we can decide whatever process we work out.
there was the original number, which is what was in the paper, and then it was drawn to my attention that the numbers didn't add up. So we were trying to just fix that by making it an up to. I'll take questions at the moment, and then we'll come back to consider what the actual discussion is.
Thank you for your help,
around
Madam
the
Chair. Much
terms of
appreciated.
reference. Sorry, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Didn't we receive a request from David Foster from the short-term accommodation rental community, a request to speak to us today?
Yes, we did.
And I notice we haven't heard from him as yet.
No, and you will have received an email from myself as Chair who declined to accept the deputation, and I set out a number of reasons in my email, which was forwarded to all councillors.
I was wondering if you could let the public know what those reasons were, because I would have thought it would be very helpful to hear from the short-term rental community as to the merits of what is proposed here. And
point of order, Madam Chair. This is entirely irrelevant to this paper. It was a private matter that has been dealt with appropriately.
this is about the openness and transparency of the conduct of the business of council, Mayor Tapsell.
Councillor Lee, can you just direct your comments through me? I'll just make a very quick comment so we can clear this matter up. So the request for a deputation comes under the standing orders. The standing orders require that it be 5 working days before the meeting. The request came on Sunday afternoon or Sunday morning. It was not within 5 working days. I also set out a number of reasons in my email, which was that during the long-term plan process, we had something like, sorry, I'll just find my numbers, 354 submissions on the the proposal that was in the consultation document for the long-term plan. As a result of that long-term plan hearings, we also heard from a significant number of submitters. There were a couple of matters that were drawn to my attention in that request for a deputation, which was around the numbers, and that is why the paper has clarified the numbers now add up to, and so and I sent a clarification as to what the July date was, so that it was not that this work would be completed by July, but that this July date would be the first report back of that committee. So I believe that it was not necessary for us to have a deputation making further submissions, given that we'd had such a huge process through the long-term plan with a huge number of submitters who were heard during that hearings process. And remembering, Councillor, this is just a terms of reference setting up the working group. The working group will have the opportunity to discuss and hear from members of the short-term rental accommodation sector, and that is the appropriate place for that to be done, not here. So I've made my ruling that it wasn't appropriate for the deputation to proceed today. So I'm going to move on. If you have any other questions, Councillor Lee?
Yes, I do. Just have more questions, in fact, several. How could the short-term accommodation community request a deputation and an opportunity to speak to us until the agenda had been published, which is 5 working days in advance? So essentially, they would be in a position to respond to the proposal here, and it would have been impossible for them to put in a request for a deputation before the agenda came out.
Sorry, I'm just going to correct myself. There were 546 submissions, so I think there's been ample opportunity for this to have been heard, and I don't think it's necessary for us to refer to this deputation issue any further, so I'm going to move on now. So, councillors, are there any further questions relating to the paper? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess mine is a wider question. It does relate to the issue that we're discussing right now. Yesterday we had a conversation with our friends from LGNZ, and it's publicly known that LGNZ has been lobbying on behalf of councils across the country for various funding methods for councils to increase our revenue, or get our share, our fair share. And of course, we introduced this as part of our strategy, our own strategy, to try and increase our revenue from a source that was currently not being adequately, I guess you could say, taxed. It's not really a tax, but rated. So my question relates to one of the top 5 priorities that they talked about, which is a, for lack of a better word that's used in Europe, a city tax, which is paid directly by the people who book, let's say, an Airbnb, and that goes directly to the local council. So there is no rates involved. It's a tax paid at the time of the transition of purchasing the accommodation. So it's a much simpler system. My question is, we've done budgets based on maintaining this rate for a fairly long duration, 2 to 3 years, I imagine. How much of an imposition and change to our budgets would it be if the government agreed to that new process? Have we got any ideas of, will that be difficult for us to manage?
Through you, Madam Chair, we would be able to accommodate that change relatively easily. I guess we'd need some clarity on how that harmonisation would occur, but it wouldn't be a significant imposition.
Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? Any further comments? Councillor Lee.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. So I'll give you credit, Madam Chair, that you can count. I'm talking in the political sense. I don't mean to be rude. I'm just looking at the numbers there of the makeup of this committee. That would be 4 from the short-term rental accommodation community, 2 from the commercial accommodation community, hotels, motels, and 2 more from the Rotorua tourism sector, which means that with you on the chair, as chair, the short-term rental accommodation representation on this committee would actually be in a minority. Why do we have people from the hotel motel arena and the broader tourism sector even on this committee, when in fact the reason that this community requested that this working group be set up was because they were being hit with a brand new rate? And it's really, I don't see why these people are on this committee, Madam Chair.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the C to make a comment, because it's not my paper, this is the staff's paper. And I also just wish to refer councillors to the long-term plan decision that we made, which was part of the recommendation. So that was in the paper. Brought up, but it was in the paper, and it was part of the council decision that we as a group made. So it's not me making that decision, it was this council, of which you are a part of, Councillor Lee. And Andrew, to make a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You've stolen my lunch, which is just to reiterate exactly what you've said, is that it was a decision of council at the long-term plan meeting, which directed the CE to set up a working party which includes representatives from the short-term accommodation sector and broader tourism sector to review the policy and propose any improvements to council. I will stress again, this is not a decision-making body, but certainly a group that will bring their expertise to make recommendations and will consider broader national policy setting changes back to council for council to make a decision in due course.
Right, thank you for that reply, but that decision that we made as a council didn't specify the makeup of the committee, so what's been presented to us here today puts the short-term rental accommodation people into a minority on this committee who are supposedly... Yeah.
Through you, Madam Chair, the staff have put together a paper, and it's for councillors to debate the merits of and make decisions on that basis. I've provided an explanation as to the thinking behind the rationale, and I stand by that, but by all means I'll leave that with, I don't know, did you have a comment to make? No? I'll leave it with councillors to debate the merits.
Well, just to make a comment then, that I would support Councillor O'Brien's concerns about making a amendment to what's proposed here to ensure that the short-term accommodation people actually have a majority on this committee, because they're the ones that are being hit with a new rate.
Councillor Lee, I'm going to just take some further questions before I come back and make some comments when we... David, do you wish to make a comment?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think it's important to remember that this particular rate is not a short-term accommodation rate. It is the business and economic development targeted rate that is applied to both Airbnb short-term accommodation providers and hotel motels, so they are the same ratepayer group, which is why this paper recommended they be included in the working group.
Are there any other questions, councillors? Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question that I've got is, can you tell me, with the working party that will be set up, how long will they be operating before an election gets on the road?
Through you, Madam Chair, the timelines, as Councillor O'Brien alluded to, are challenging. We've tried to find a balance between not dragging this on too long, appreciating that these are people who are contributing their time, but also trying to get an update to this council before the election period. So I'd initially suggested that it would be good to complete this work in this triennium. Unfortunately, the time frame between getting complete data for the year, as David has mentioned earlier, is challenging. And so where we've landed is that there will be a report back to this committee in July 2025, but it's not likely that that will be a complete report, and that it will carry over into the new triennium to complete its recommendations. So the time frame still is, the original time frame for reviewing the policy is no later than 3 years, so it will be in the next triennium that the next council reviews this policy, but they will need 2 complete years of data to do that.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to David, could you tell me, remind me, it's in the report somewhere here, what's the name of this particular rate that is relevant here?
Is the Business Economic Development Targeted Rate. This is referred to in the report as the BEDTR, the Business Economic Development Targeted Rate.
And can you give us an idea of the other entities that pay this rate? Just quickly, just a few.
Sure. Any business within Rotorua who meets the rating criteria set under the policy engaging in a economic activity within Rotorua. So it includes hotels, motels, businesses within Rotorua, and the reason I guess the short-term accommodation providers like Airbnbs are now included is because when we set the rate in the long-term plan, we expanded the definition of a business eligible for that rate to now include those people who have their property available for short-term accommodation for a whole house for more than 60 days.
So how long has this these other entities been paying this particular rate? Sometime.
Since the inception of the rate, it'll be
right. So this is a brand new rate starting last year for the short-term rental accommodation people. It's new for them. So in the long-term plan process, council proposed something that turned out to be unworkable, and so this working group was established in response to the unrest that was created in this new rating group, wasn't it?
Councillor Lee, could you clarify the question for my staff, please?
Yeah, The purpose of the working group, which was a suggestion of the short-term accommodation people, was to address this new rate as it applied to the short-term rental accommodation people. It's already well established in other parts of the community that are non-controversial. So why would other people from other parts of the community who are already paying a rate and it's not controversial be serving on this committee?
I think it's in the paper itself, Councillor Lee. So if you read the paper, the purpose of the working party is to look at the implementation. So this is implementation process and the effects of the policy on that industry, the fairness issues around the destination marketing, and we were quite clear in that in terms of our LTP consultation, is that those that benefit directly from the marketing of this destination should be paying their fair share. So there was a question of equity, and so that was the reason that we were looking at whether the tourism sector should be part of that and proposing any improvements to that. We wanted to look at the business implications on the short-term rental operators and their service providers, then looking at the wider picture of what's happening around the country, and that's the sort of thing that Councillor Patterson was referring to. Are there other advocacy methods around trying to persuade government to look at things like bed taxes or changes to the IVL or whatever, and then to suggest improvements to this policy. So I think that the recommendation there in the paper sets out what the purpose of the committee is for.
Yes, okay, so maybe the purpose of the committee as proposed has changed from what was originally proposed by the short-term rental accommodation people, but you raised the issue of equity, Madam Chair, and that's good. One thing that seems to be missing from this paper is the question of representation on the Rotorua NZ for this short-term rental accommodation community. So my concern comes back when you want to talk about equity
Hold on, Madam Chair, are we still, sorry, I've got a mic. Are we still in question time?
Yes.
I think we are.
Can
I'm
we
just.
get to a question, please?
Thank you, Councillor Worry.
I
Councillor
would
Lee.
have been at a question by now had I not been interrupted. Thank you, Councillor Worry.
Councillors, through me, please. Councillor Worry, thank you. Can you just direct comments and questions through me, please? So, Councillor Lee, the question.
What arrangements are going to be in place for giving the short-term rental accommodation people who are going to be, who are being freshly rated on Rotorua NZ, which spends their money?
Sorry, I thought this was a question relating to the paper.
Well, it seems to be missing from the paper that these people are being expected to pay taxes without representation on how their money gets spent. So are there any, has any consideration been made to giving these people representation on Rotorua NZ, which will be spending their money?
So, Councillor Lee, that's a separate process. So we have a board appointment process for our council-controlled organisations. There is a process that we go through looking at a skills matrix. There are board appointment term dates, so that is not a discussion for this here. There's also the independentness that we need at the moment in terms of Rotorua NZ, who will be providing the data and assisting our CFO with the rating information. So I think this is not a discussion for today, and we don't have every single sector of business on our Rotorua NZ board. So I'm not sure if there are people from farming or forestry or plumbers or drain layers or anything like that. So I'm just making that point. And that is a discussion for another day. So do you have another question?
Sure. Do we have an open and transparent appointment process for the Board of NZ?
Yes, we do.
Aren't these
And so I
decisions
make no
made?
further comments on that. Yes, we do. So I'm moving on now. Do you have any other questions? Councillor Lee?
I think Councillor O'Brien may.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, David, just one final question, if I may. Can I ask, when we considered this proposal last year, when we voted for it, there was estimated figures coming through, bandied about how much we hoped to bring in on the numbers at that time, an estimate. Can I have, if we bring in more money than we anticipated, where is that extra money going to? So we said at the time we would ring fence that for RNZ. That was the commitment we gave the STAs at the time. If it's bringing in more money, does that money still go to RNZ as well, or is that going into the council funds? General fund, if I could put it that way.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When Council agreed the budgets through the long-term plan, we agreed set funding to Rotorua NZ to be funded through this rate. Any addition, should Council be in a position where the business economic development targeted rate brings in more money than we had budgeted, that money remains with Council to fund our other activities. We've set our budgets with Rotorua NZ, and conversely, if that rate brings in less money, then we fund that in other ways as well to reach our agreed funding with Rotorua NZ.
Thank you. And is it likely we would get an update on those figures during the AP process?
Yes, that would be correct.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, councillors. If there are no more questions at this stage, we do have a recommendation in the papers, so I'll read those out. That the committee approve the terms of reference for the short-term accommodation working group, that the Chief Executive undertake the recruitment process for the group in conjunction with the council representatives, and that updates on the progress of the group be included in the regular progress reports. I'm happy to move that recommendation. Is there a seconder for it? Thank you, Councillor Waru. Now open for discussion. As the mover of this motion, I'm happy to speak to it, and it seems that a lot of the questions have been directed to myself. But would I remind councillors that this was a decision that we made as a council when we were looking at funding operations and differing ways in which we could find financing for the destination tourism marketing activities of Rotorua NZ, which if we had not proceeded with this, it would have just more of the burden would have fell on just the general ratepayer. And there are businesses who may, like I know Councillor Barker's mentioned, farmers may not directly impact from destination tourism marketing, but we do have Rotorua NZ as both our economic development arm and our tourism marketing arm, so they are doing that joint piece of work. We recognised that during that long-term plan process that it wasn't all that easy, and that there were lots of suggestions that were coming from the sector, and that there needed to be an opportunity for the sector to have some further input into the refinement, the review of this policy, the settings, and for them to make recommendations. So we agreed the scope of the policy was to be reviewed after a certain period of time. We agreed that it needed at least a couple of years because we needed to get through a summer period. We needed a full year's worth of data. We needed to see what immediate impacts it would have with the change on the short-term rental accommodation sector. And then once we had that data, this working group would be set up, and we would have people like David, our CFO, and potentially Rotorua NZ providing that data into that group so that they could then come together, meet, make recommendations. The paper does set out the purpose of the committee, and I read that out before. I don't think it's a requirement that we have a majority of this type of member or that type of member. The purpose is for the group to come together to work collegially, to make recommendations as a group. So remembering this is a recommendatory committee only, they will be reporting back to the Community and District Development Committee or whatever the appropriate committee is in the future if it goes beyond the election. The composition of the numbers was up to 9, and that was to represent the diversity of the different sectors that are going to be affected by this. There will be a transparent expressions of interest process, so once this recommendation is passed, if it is passed today, Council will go out requesting people that are interested in putting their hands up to being a part of this working group to put their hands up. There will then be an opportunity for councillors to accept the nominations or the expressions of interest to choose the people. So there are further steps in this process for councillors to be involved. It's not the end of the line in terms of this process, because remembering there are going to be reporting back, there's more information that's needed. It's an iterative piece of work, and the whole purpose is to make further recommendations to refine and improve the policy. So, Councillor Waru as a seconder, do you wish to make any comment? Thank you. So I'll open for comments now. Thank you, councillors. Oh, there are no other comments then, so Councillor Lee.
Always up for a comment, Madam Chair. This is, I don't know why it's been so difficult to actually give the short-term accommodation rental people an opportunity to be heard. This was their suggestion for this committee, so that they could talk to council about how this policy has affected them. It seems that this is a little too little, a little too late, and it's been hijacked, it seems to me. And so, yes, I would be happy to move an amendment, or if Councillor O'Brien wishes to move an amendment, that would ensure that the short-term accommodation people got a majority so that we can hear from them. I would be proposing that to remedy the problems that are in the current proposal.
Councillor Lee, as I understand it, and I'll just check with Greg here, but we have a motion on the table which has been moved and seconded, so I need to deal with this motion as it currently is on the table before I can deal with any amendments. Okay, sorry, I need a correction. I don't know if, Greg, if you just want to clarify then. So you need to fully state what the amendment is. Sorry, I'm just...
It would involve using the word maximum to, so if we, so we're talking about the area where it says the community members will be made up of individuals who.
Sorry, can you just...
If we change that to a minimum of 5, then I think job done.
Sorry, I just lost my... I'm just trying to... Which page are you...
So I'm looking at page 23 of the agenda. Well, we've got a new one sent out to us today, didn't we? But
so page 23, so,
yep.
Sorry, which... Just tell me the line, sorry, I'm just not...
okay, so...
So are you doing the motion or are you doing the membership?
Well, it's the membership issue that is of concern. So the recommendation as it currently stands doesn't actually make any reference to the makeup of the committee. So perhaps if we want to do it that way, we could add a new recommendation that details the makeup of the committee.
Sorry, I'm still not following. So just direct me, what is the amendment that you're seeking to make?
So we currently have 4 recommendations.
Yes.
So I guess we have 2 options, and that would be to amend the terms of reference, if that's possible at this stage, as proposed, or to have a 5th recommendation that details what the makeup of the committee should be. Which would be easier, Madam Chair? Probably to put it into the recommendation, wouldn't it, as an additional number 5? Okay,
I'm just getting some advice here from Greg in that the recommendation refers to the paper, so we need to amend the paper. It's a staff report, so I'll just maybe, if you just go back to the amendment that you're proposing in the paper, and then I'll ask the CE to comment.
We can't review.
Sorry, can we just need to, it's a staff recommendation, so I'm just going to take some advice from, so if we just take a break for 5 minutes, thank you.
Sure.
So, thank you, Councillor Wing, for waiting online. So, councillors, we had a proposed amendment, so now I'm waiting for the amendment, which I still don't know what that is. So, what is the amendment that has been proposed, Councillor Lee? There is a current motion on the table, so what is the amendment to that motion?
So there are 4 recommendations on the table, Madam Chair. That the
2, 3 and 4.
Yep, so if we look at recommendation number 2, that the committee approve the terms of reference for the short-term working group, but with the committee comprised of five representatives from the short-term rental accommodation community, up to 2 from the hotel motel accommodation, and up to 2 from organisations that have interests in the Rotorua tourism sector. So same wording as in the
So we'll just check. So effectively what you're changing is the membership and chair. So then that will be a working party that will comprise up to 10 members.
not changing the mayor, not changing the chair, I don't believe.
No. It's under the subheading membership and chair.
Oh.
So in the paper,
Oh,
the
right.
working party, effectively what you're suggesting is that the working party will now comprise up to 10 members, which will be now up to 5 for the STR accommodation sector, up to 2 from the accommodation sector, and up to 2 from the tourism sector. Is that what you're proposing?
Yes.
So is there a seconder for that motion? No, there is no seconder for that, so that amendment lapses. So we are back to the original motion. So are there any other people that wish to speak? I have Mayor Tapsell that wishes to speak to the motion that's currently on the table.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Look, I just wanted to say that this shows that we listen to the significant amount of community feedback. I'm really looking forward to seeing who comes on board and really encourage those in our community to please apply to this. We really want to get some good contribution from a diverse range of our community, because at the end of the day, tourism and hospitality are our biggest employer here in Rotorua, and our short-term accommodation play a very important role in this too. So we don't invest any money without expecting a return. So just want our community to know that the purpose of this short-term accommodation rate has been to make sure that we're supporting the industry that provides most jobs to our community, and making sure that we're also rating people in the fairest way possible for those who also benefit from it too. So we only see this as a good thing moving forward, and hope to increase the amount of visitors that are coming to Rotorua. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are you happy to take my amendment now?
Okay, if you have an amendment.
Yes,
so,
please. So thank you. If I could just see the original.
Okay, what's the proposed?
Thank you. Could I just see the, so I can get the wording correct? Thank you, Madam Chair. So as is, except I would, my motion would move, amendment would move that the Chief Executive undertake the recruitment process for the group made up of 3 from the STR sector, 1 from the commercial, sorry, apologies, Madam Chair. 1 from the commercial accommodation sector, and 1 from the Rotorua tourism sector. And sorry, and the chair, apologies.
I think that speaks for itself, given this
Thank
is
you.
the recruitment line. So just make sure the staff have got that up on. Sorry, I can't see backwards. I've got eyes in the back of my head.
I think it's pretty self-explanatory, isn't it? Oh, I'll do a quick.
So, Councillor O'Brien, that's reflected what you've just read out then?
Thank
What's
you.
on the
Yes,
board?
yes,
Thank
I'm
you.
happy with that. Would you like, can I talk to it, or would you?
I think
prefer-
I'll just get a
Seconder?
seconder first. So is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Patterson, thank you. So if you wish to speak to that now, Councillor
Thank you,
O'Brien.
Madam Chair. All in all, I endorse what was put in front of us in the report. I think it was a very good quality report, and I thank David and his team for it. I didn't vote for the process last year, as you may remember. One of my concerns why I couldn't vote for it was the makeup of the working group wasn't specifically spelt out. Some of my concerns that I raised at that time have resurfaced here, in my opinion. I think that we need to make sure that the idea about this for me is to make sure that we have the trust of the STA or STR sector to make sure that they do feel that this is an open and transparent process. I think you've done a very good job as chair in some challenging efforts today, and so by and large I accept. I just think we need to refine this so that STR is the primary focus of what this working group should be about. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to echo Councillor O'Brien's sentiments. I would like to make one little extra comment, if I may, that I'm kind of concerned that the comment from David, and I understand what budgets are about, but if there is extra money that is generated by this, by the people who are paying that rate, believing it is going to support Rotorua NZ, that money should be funneled towards Rotorua NZ, any additional money that comes through this, especially our events sector. We don't have enough money in that budget. We already know the reasons why, and this could be one way to top that up so we can actually start attracting events to Rotorua that generate significant new income, and it would actually benefit the people who are paying that rate. Because as we know, many Airbnb users, for example, are here for events. So let's keep that money where it should go. That's all mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support the amendment by Councillor O'Brien because for me personally, I thought that during our LTP, the 546 submitters that presented throughout that week-long time, I thought there was some excellent presentations from them. I learnt a lot from what the presenters gave, and the willingness on their part that they did want to pay their fair share and everything. And I think that this new 3-1-1 and the chair is reasonable. It gives them, I think, confidence that they're coming to a working group that did hear them. So no, I think that's a very good compromise. And there is a paragraph in here. Oh, look, mainly saying that we want to ensure that there's fairness in the decision we're making regarding this, and hopefully something will be good in place for either next summer or the one after. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe, e te tiamana o tira tātou katoa. Look, I just think if we're basing this on fairness, with all due respect, this would look totally different, this rōpū. And I'm saying that from the point of, I've heard the comments around, oh, well, they're paying this much, now they need to have a special group. Kaiha te rōpū ki ngā iwi. Kaiha te rōpū ki ngā tourism sector. Where's all that? We're trying to be inclusive here. And it sounds like there seems to be a whakaaro that there should be a little bit different here because there's a bit of money here, which I would actually challenge around, okay, how much is the rest of the sector getting paying, or the sectors in terms of the business economic rate that we've just been told about? How much is that in comparison to what the short-term accommodation sector will be paying? Now, if we put that into context, we go and make a rōpū, a group, based on that knowledge or that logic, it would look totally different. So I'm just saying, I think this is a fairness thing, and I like it how it is. That's why I've seconded it. I think that leaves things open. The way it's been worded too, there is room to wriggle in there for the short-term accommodation. We had all those, in the long-term plan process, we had all those presentations and all those submissions to come forward to us, which was pretty clear, well, in my view anyway, it's pretty clear. And I think we're just trying to change this thing and lock down something. Well, oh yeah, I'm as I've said at the start, I'm more supportive of how it currently sits. So, kia ora, that's where I sit. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Waru. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would like to acknowledge the short-term rental accommodation people who fronted up in big numbers for the long-term plan. What we originally proposed was alarming, and all of them have been willing to engage in a conversation constructively with Council, and here we are in February. What Councillor Patterson said was right on the money, I think, that we really need to be rolling out the red carpet for them and engaging with them and winning their confidence. There must have been, from memory, 10, maybe a dozen different submitters who offered to participate in the working group. So what's proposed here is only 4. Now Councillor O'Brien has proposed reducing that to 3, and it's not immediately obvious to me how that would advantage the short-term accommodation people. So I'd love to have some persuasion as to why that would be good for them to be able to support that, but I'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'm repeating what Councillor Waru said, but I'll make it a little more subtle or succinct. I don't think, not subtle, succinct, sorry. I don't think this provides enough flexibility. If there's valid reason to have more representation for valid reasons, then let's hear it. But I think this is a bit too restrictive, I'm sorry, so I won't be supporting it.
Any further comments, councillors? Yes, as the mover, if there's no further comments, as the mover, you have the final right of reply.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Councillor Waru for that very considered, and I hear what he's saying, but we could say that on every process we ever bring forward to every committee around here. And what this particular paper reflected was improvements to the STA accommodation process. Now, for me, when this was first announced that it was going to be a full commercial rate last year, and then we got all, we could relive that, how it was delivered, 2 letters, 1 letter, we could relive all that, let's not. But I think that it's very important that we re-establish some trust here. Now, this process, according to the paper, which is what we're supposed to be discussing, is supposed to be around improvements to the STA process around how we collect, whether it's appropriate, whether changes are needed in the future. So definitely they should be the most, for me, more represented than anybody else, in my opinion. Now, secondly, again, I go back to what I say, we're mid-Feb now, the adverts will probably go out, I would think, sometime early March, give it a month for a proper process, etc. like that. By the time they first meet, then there's going to be a report due. Look at 9 people around this table. Suddenly up to 9 people from various views are suddenly going to come up with a paper in July that's all harmonious. For me, we should be much better off, have a smaller group, let them focus on the issues raised in the paper. Then after the election, there can be a new process, because we don't know what the committees are going to be like. We don't know what that process is going to look like. So for me, smaller group, let's get the work done. Let's get the process underway, the working group underway. I'd be more than happy for you as chair to be part of that process. It would be very good. So that's why I commend my motion forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, councillors. I think we've had enough discussion on this today. So we've got the amended motion. I'm not going to read that out, but it's now to have 3 STR, 1 community, 1 tourism sector representative, with the rest of the terms of reference being adopted. So I'm going to put that motion now. All those in favour, please raise their hands. Thank you. Those against? Thank you. That is carried. Can I just thank everyone, and in particular, can I thank those members of the public who have obviously got an interest in the short-term rental accommodation review of the rate, and so we look forward to getting on with this piece of work. It's unfortunate we've had to have a bit of debate today, but the whole rationale for this is to try and do some recommendations, some review, and ensuring fairness across the sector. And regardless of the number of members, we're wanting to get on and do this process as soon as possible. So thank you very much for your contribution on this paper. So thank you for that, councillors. I'm aware that we are now at nearly 11 o'clock. I think we'll just take a short break now until 10 past 11. Thank you. Yep, thank you. Well, we'll resume the meeting now. Thank you, councillors. So we're moving on now to the Airport Quarterly Report to the year in December 2024. So can I have a mover and a seconder that the report we received? Thank you, Councillor O'Brien, seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, thank you, that is carried. And welcome Kevin, who is the Airport Board Chair, who's on Zoom, and welcome to you, Nicole, as the CE of the airport. In your hands.
Kia ora, thank you very much. I know you've still got quite a few things to get through today, so I will keep this short and snappy. There isn't too much to add to what was already in the paper, so I'll just cover the highlights and then obviously take any questions. From a financial perspective, lower passenger numbers. Oops, sorry. Let's go. There we go. Oh, too far. Okay, lower passenger numbers have driven a 5% drop in aeronautical revenue. This is expected, the lower passenger numbers are expected to continue for the remainder of the financial year, or the remainder of at least up until October, as Air New Zealand's reduced capacity and schedule changes kick in on the 18th of February, so next week. That is, however, being offset by lower than budgeted costs at the moment. Operating expenses were 11% lower than budget. This will slightly bounce back up as it is partially balanced out with some upcoming planned maintenance, and overheads are 4% below budget. What is above budget is depreciation, because we unexpectedly needed to revalue the assets again due to a change in the way the auditors were managing the sensitivity, or the materiality, I should say. So depreciation was higher than budgeted. So overall, we've got a net surplus for the first 6 months of 446,000 versus a budget of 486. Non-financial performance is all on track, and the legal and compliance calendar was attached to the pack. There's nothing of significance to report there. To an operational update. The Tahiki consent for the geothermal power plant, which I have mentioned before, was granted with conditions which were designed to protect aviation safety. The aeronautical study has still not been completed, but there is a condition that the applicant has to appoint a consultant by the end of February. So we're expecting, hopefully we'll hear from them soon. I have spoken to them but haven't heard back. Terrace Airside opted not to renew their lease. You may have seen releases that went out. We went through a very thorough procurement process, had some really good interest, about 10 expressions of interest, a couple of local ones and a number from around the country. After a very thorough process, Boasters was selected, and they're operating the hangar cafe out at the airport. A pop-up is open while a new fit-out is in place, and we're looking at trying to do something that really reflects Rotorua, so watch this space. We've got a focus on obstacle management continues. You've heard me talk about trees before. That's quite a big project, so that's continuing. And this may have been mentioned but wasn't in one of the reports, so I just thought it was adding it in again, that Rotorua Airport received 2 awards at the New Zealand Airports Awards in November, one for the Matariki dinner that was done in that we hosted with, and then Rotorua NZ organised, and one for Julie Southall as our commercial manager, who was named Emerging Leader of the Year. And looking forward, obviously I just touched on the Air New Zealand schedule changes earlier. They're coming in effective 18th of February. These changes, Air New Zealand just advised a couple of days ago, are being continued through till the end of October. That will give them an opportunity to see how those changes in the Auckland and Wellington timings go. This will result in lower than budgeted PAX numbers, and work for the Airport Business Park continues, working on getting a business case ready to put through to the airport board. Do you have any questions?
Thank you very much. Nicole, just go to Kevin first. Kevin, as the board chair, do you have any comments that you wish to make from a board perspective?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to leave it to questions and let Nicole have the first crack at responding.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin. So I'll take questions from councillors. Thank you, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, thank you, Nicole, for your report. Just a couple of short questions. Firstly, the Boasters Cafe, is that the one in Hope Upper Street?
Yes.
Fantastic. Great coffee. You mentioned the awards that we got for the efforts you did with the conference that we had across the road there, or the expo, I should say. Any plans for trends?
So that's all up to Rotorua NZ. I will leave Andrew to answer that question when appropriate. So no, the airport isn't doing anything specific at this stage.
Okay, thank you. Now, one thing, the airport business plan that you're talking about, I have a friend who is an avid skydiver, and he was giving me a hard time the other day about why is it he has to go to Taupo to enjoy his sport. Well, is there any plans of that coming back to Rotorua?
Over the years, we have had a couple of companies interested in coming back to Rotorua. That hasn't eventuated into anything. And that's one of the reasons why we're so keen to do something like the business park, because it means that if we do have operators wanting to come, we've got somewhere we could put them. At the moment, we would be very constrained with where we could put a new operator that wanted to come and open up.
That makes sense. Thank you. One last question. I guess this is a bit of crystal ball gazing, but with Hamilton entering the trans-Tasman market by their alignment with another airport, or should I say operator, have there been any considerations given for us to put our hand up to any emerging operators to come to Rotorua and perhaps create a new Rotorua Queenstown Australia route? One that jumps to mind is Turkish Airlines. I believe they're looking, interestingly, to come to New Zealand. And is there any thought of putting our hand up to see if we could bid for that?
So I can't see how a Turkish airline flight would work. Obviously, Rotorua Airport suits Tasman operations. So unless Turkish Airlines were looking to tag fly across the Tasman, I'm not sure how that would work. Look, our focus at the moment is concentrating on the services that we've got and really strengthening those and looking at building the domestic sector back up. So at the moment, we're not looking at reigniting international services. However, obviously, we want to grow the domestic services that we do have, so we're looking at opportunities to do that. It's just part of our day-to-day plans and what we do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question from Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Nicole and Kevin. Just firstly, I'd like to say congratulations on the awards and also on your operations, even with the difficult environment that I guess aviation is, or that we're facing right now. My question is just around the Air New Zealand, the significant schedule changes that Air New Zealand are implementing. You know, in the report that you've mentioned that that those changes reiterate the need for Rotorua locals to use the Rotorua services, because Air New Zealand will make the changes to the flights that are not performing. Having spoken to many, you know, locals and also our business community, one of the things that they've been very concerned about is the reliability of flights in and out of Rotorua. And that's not a Rotorua Airport, something I guess that Rotorua Airport could control, because it's been the weather and the mechanical and engineering issues with Air New Zealand. So I guess just on that, I just want to ensure that the advocacy, I guess, that the airport is channeling that through to Air New Zealand. And I know many of the locals are going to Tauranga or other neighbouring airports for those services. So I'm just making sure that, I guess, Rotorua Airport is providing, I guess, that feedback back to Air New Zealand and ensuring that it's it's known that it's not a Rotorua Airport issue, but rather maybe a geographical weather issue or the mechanical and engineering issues.
Yes, it would be safe to say that the advocacy is very strong coming out of both Rotorua Airport and Rotorua NZ as well. I know Andrew and I are on the same page and often discuss these issues and work collaboratively together to make sure that Air New Zealand are getting all the messages that they need. For example, just one example, we're doing absolutely everything we can. I've got 2 staff members in Christchurch today. The purpose of the driving purpose of the trip was to go and visit the Air New Zealand Day of Ops Centre to understand from their perspective what's happening there as well, and influence and make sure, you know, our aeronautical manager is talking to pilots, etc. Say, is there anything we can do? Advocacy is absolutely very, very strong, and we'll continue to, I'm not going to say fight the good fight, but make sure that Rotorua needs and business needs are at the forefront in their minds of what's happening and what the changes that they make, what the flow and impacts could be as well. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair. Thank you very much again, Nicole, for your report. Can I just ask, and Kevin may want to pass a comment too, with the slight drop in numbers and changes that with Air New Zealand, etc., are we still confident that for the financial year 25, the reduction target in our debt down to 9.75, is that still, are you still on track? Are you still confident you can deliver on that?
Yeah, at this stage, there's been no decision made to vary that at all. So we'll have to see how the next couple of months go. But that's what we're still aiming for. There's been no decision made to make any variation.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Nicole. Can you just clarify for me the service funding agreement that's Council supplying 1.8 million for the year? That comes from Council?
Yes, that's correct.
And the interest that is paid, that comes to Council
yes.
back as well. So
yep.
Net, the ratepayers are subsidising the airport at about 1.4 million a year?
Yes. Yes.
Thereabouts?
Yep. And that money comes back in debt repayment.
Do we anticipate the need for that support to be ongoing, or is it what's in the long-term plan? So
in the long-term plan, that support continues. Ultimately, what the airport is trying to achieve is to reduce that. That's why we're looking at initiatives such as the Airport Business Park in the hope of bringing that down. However, with the current economic environment, if you ask me right now, it will need to continue for the foreseeable future until we can get some growth back.
And that growth is hinged off Air New Zealand,
yep.
basically?
Primarily, yes. Obviously, if there are other options, we will continue. We will explore those, but Air New Zealand is our primary customer.
Okay. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Waru, followed by Councillor Lee.
Kia ora te tiamana. Kia ora, Nicole and Kevin. Thank you for the report. Just interested in a couple of questions around the obstacle management. It's got the trees. What do you mean that's on track? Have there been conversations had with particular landowners and stuff?
Yep, so we're working through. We've done 4 lots of cutting so far with various neighbours, is probably the best way to put it. And that's made a difference to some of the operational constraints. And we're just at the moment waiting for some assessments. So we use a company called Black Maps that take all the LiDAR, survey, look at the growth rate of the trees and understand exactly the situation. We're waiting for some more information back on those, and then we'll be going to the next lot of land owners to discuss what may or may not need to be done on their land. So we've got quite a thorough process that we follow and
cool, thank you.
Make sure we've got all the information in hand first.
Excellent. And the other question I had was just around the frequency in which you meet with Unuku Kopako. What is the frequency? As opposed to someone on the board being from Unuku Kōpako, do you engage in other ways? I'm asking.
Yes, sure. So look, it is a little bit ad hoc, but we do actually have I sort of reach out to them on a regular-ish basis. I'm actually catching up with them in a couple of weeks to talk about the memorandum understanding and what more we can be doing to make sure we're bringing that to life. So we don't have a scheduled, every 2 months appointment. They know that I'm always contactable and they do reach out when necessary and vice versa. Yep.
So are you confident the things that you do discuss are being, I suppose, communicated to the rest of Unuku Kōpako? Just a question, you don't have if you're not sure. Kei te pai.
My conversations are all with Preani, Nareha or Ralph, and I don't have any feedback either way from anybody else within the iwi to tell me if there's any concerns or otherwise. So the conversations that I have with them go really well. It's up to them what they communicate back.
Thank you. No, that's my questions. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Otto. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, just a quick question. We recall from a previous report that there's been some improvements made to the flight path, which would mean more planes being able to land. Would you be likely to be getting any feedback on more planes arriving? I guess we've had pretty good weather so far, but or is that just an operational matter that doesn't come to your attention?
Yeah, it is an operational matter. I mean, the flight path is just one string in the bow. From a reliability perspective, we do get the OTP or on-time performance numbers each month from in New Zealand. The last couple of months have been really good. We've seen significant improvement, but we're just waiting to see and ensure that that continues.
Yeah, and probably more likely to show up in winter, I suppose.
Yeah, you are right that this time of year is typically better anyway.
Yeah.
So we just need to make sure that these efforts and the schedule changes that Air New Zealand are making are designed to be able to improve their reliability as well. So there's just many moving parts in the whole process.
Cool, thank you very much.
Thank you. I just have one question, Nicole and Kevin. It's just this report's to December 2024, and the drop in passenger numbers and revenue is obviously going to be ongoing, and you've had that saving in revenue, but is that really sustainable, and is there any contingency planning going on to ensure that the airport is able to operate within these sort of reduced revenue and then continuing the savings and overheads?
Yep, so we've just done a sort of a very rough cut of the FY26 budget, and for the purposes of the statement of intent, which is obviously due to council in the next few weeks, it's very rough and things will change, but yeah, that's something that we do obviously as part of our ongoing budgeting and financial planning with the board. So yeah, we're continually looking at that type of thing.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, do you have any other final comments that you wish to make in response to any of the questions you've heard?
Just want to reiterate what Nicole was saying, Madam Chair, about keeping an eye on the budget risk. The board's constantly on that, and when we meet again next week, we'll be covering that firstly in a risk workshop, but secondly as a normal close look through our board meeting budget process.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Nicole and Kevin, for taking the time to attend the meeting today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillors, we'll move now to page 29 of the agenda, which is the joint regional deals application. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Thank you, Councillor Brown. Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, thank you, carried. And welcome back, Andrew, and hello, Justin. So we're in your hands for the presentation on the joint regional deals. Staff will bring.
I'm hoping we've got a slide deck.
Yes, you will have. It's just coming.
Awesome. Okay, we'll try and keep this brief. Obviously, we've provided in the paper a little bit of a summary in terms of where we're up to in terms of the work to date. I've got a little bit more context in terms of this presentation that will hopefully start to fill in some of the blanks around what we're going to be focused on over the next kind of couple of weeks. We also included the original, application to be considered in the regional deals framework. I think a lot of the commentary we kind of get back on that is that it? It's pretty brief. It doesn't provide a lot of information, but that probably reflects the fact that actually, we're working to a pretty tight time frame in terms of getting this work done. So as the paper indicates, we're obviously working with our friends down the road in Taupo. We've got a combined kind of region that we think makes sense when we look at it from an economic standpoint, particularly when we kind of look at those kind of core drivers in terms of our economies across both those areas. The regional deal framework also states that we need to include the regional council. We've probably got to a position now the regional council is actually involved in 3 of these applications, and certainly we'll be presenting this document to them tomorrow to ensure that they're comfortable in terms of signing off our proposal by the deadline at the end of the month. A little bit of background, so obviously, and apologies for kind of going back over some content you're probably already aware of, but obviously the government released this initiative late last year. They've requested that local and regional councils work together to form a region, and really it's around sort of partnering with central government to unlock funding and financing tools, regulatory relief or reprioritisation of funding. They're after us to take a pretty long-term view, so they're really after us sort of casting out kind of 30 years and thinking through, how could our district or region look different over that time period. They've been pretty clear that they're looking to announce a single regional deal in 2025 and then 2 in 2026, and there are no details beyond that. And so, we're realistic that there's not going to be a big kind of quantum of these kind of anticipated. This is very much they're working out as we kind of go along. Looking obviously for alignment of public, private and iwi initiatives in terms of that as well. A couple of things that are just really important to kind of just keep in the back of your mind is there is no money on the table around this. So there is no pot of gold or cash, and so I think we've had this kind of discussion. What about this project? What about that? The reality is there is no money. So, the ability for us to kind of go, yep, there's a pot of money we're kind of bidding in to grab, $1 billion to do this or 500 million, doesn't exist. So very much it is around thinking about what other funding tools could be brought to the table and what other mechanisms can be kind of utilised to deliver some of these projects that are kind of anticipated. Obviously, through this kind of process, they're really keen that we just kind of use existing resources and existing information that's available. I know in the conversations we've had, they've been pretty clear that they don't really want us to be kind of going and getting expensive consultants to help prepare all this. I can assure you we haven't. This has been largely the work of Justin and Rick and his team down in Taupo that have been kind of beavering away over Christmas, just to kind of make sure that we've pulled together an appropriate amount of content for the application. They are looking for how councils would contribute, and so we'll touch on a little bit more on that as we kind of get into the presentation. And obviously looking for, how would this be brought to bear at a regional level? So I know there's a little bit of discussion earlier around a bed levy or a bed tax. I think I'm just trying to remember what description you used, Councillor Patterson, but we've got to kind of think about those that get applied at a regional level. Notwithstanding that, I think you will have seen some commentary from Mayor Brown out of Auckland, who's been pretty clear they have included a bed levy in their request, and so certainly, the way we've framed ours is to think about, here's the suite of tools that could be brought to bear to really unlock some growth. As I alluded to, we've got a pretty tight set of timeframes that we're working to, so certainly they've asked for this light touch proposal form to be submitted by 28th of February, which is only a couple of weeks away. Again, no use of consultants, and realistically there isn't a lot of time for a whole lot of stakeholder engagement around this, so we've had to be pretty targeted in terms of thinking about who we're talking to and why and when. Obviously, just a little bit around our approach. We have within the instructions we've received in terms of putting this proposal together, we've had some direction that we need to kind of talk around some quite distinct areas, and we need to kind of focus those down into not a big laundry list of here's 200 things we'd like to do, but what are the kind of 4 or 5 kind of really key priorities that would turn the dial. We've obviously, as I've been talking about, we've been working with Amplify in Taupo, and obviously we've been continuing to kind of talk quite closely with obviously your officers here in Council, and similarly into Taupo District Council as well. We have done obviously a lot of desktop research, had a look at a number of international examples in terms of thinking about how we turn the dial, but we are trying to stay at quite a high level in terms of where we land this. We are really taking probably a little bit of a different lens to say some of the other regional deal applications we're aware of that are getting put together. I'm mindful that when we've been in some of these discussions with other regions, they're taking a bit of a view that says, look, they're kind of doing what I would call more of the deficit type fixing, where they might have we need to, spend $1 gazillion on a new wastewater treatment plant to be able to unlock some housing growth, or we need to do, we've got a huge amount of congestion on a road that needs to be fixed. We've probably taken a slightly different lens that says actually we think we've got some really strong growth opportunities across our 2 districts, and that's obviously where we're focusing in terms of how do we unlock those growth opportunities, how do we create jobs, and obviously wealth creation overall. We've also taken a view that says, look, we think we get in trouble where we try to pick winners, and particularly given the time frames, trying to kind of get to a level where we kind of go, we think this project's a complete winner, we don't think that's our role, we do think that we're better to cast out a little bit longer term and to think about what are the right settings that actually encourage the private sector to come to bear, and they will naturally, the best projects will float to the top. And this is pretty much straight out of the paper, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but the 4 focus areas were obviously really kind of centred on tourism, the forestry and the bioeconomy, energy and decarbonisation, and freight and logistics. So I'm not going to, I think this content's pretty much taken straight out of the initial application. Where we're now getting to in terms of starting to flesh this out a little bit more is thinking around when we look at the tourism supply and demand picture is, how do we really incentivise investment in large-scale tourism assets, So certainly when we look at that, I guess the best description I can kind of give is, how do we get to a place where actually we're starting to see new hotel developments? How do we get to a place where we actually see, larger scale tourism investments, the types of things that people kind of come up with, big water parks or that kind of thing that you'd see traditionally offshore. And we've tried to have a look in terms of, how does this happen overseas? I think reflecting that actually, this is a globally competitive kind of space. We probably, having spent a bit of time offshore over Christmas, fortunately, it's pretty interesting to see the kind of, the scale and size of investment that's going on, and we're just not at the starting line. Where we really want to be kind of sort of challenging the Crown through this process is thinking about, why not? What are those kind of different tools and mechanisms that can be brought to bear? Our regional deal proposal will kind of centre on, we think these are some of the mechanisms that are worth having a further discussion around. We're not necessarily saying one is better than another, but we want to be at the table to basically have a little bit more of a discussion to go, how could you bring these to bear to actually really accelerate development, to really accelerate investment by the private sector in terms of some of these particular areas. When you look at the tourism one, the types of tools that we're looking to suggest would be thinking about kind of GST rebates, particularly when you kind of look at, and it's the old kind of story about saying if you do nothing, you get nothing. If you encourage the investment and you look to share in some of that short-term upside, the Crown is still going to be a major beneficiary over the length of that project when you look out over 50 to 100 years. We do know that there's obviously some streamlining and simplification of FDI and the Overseas Investment Office, which has already been happening. But again, we think that there's some further opportunities in that space. And then certainly we also think that, when we talk about how does a local council kind of come to contribute to this, thinking about, and this is relative to the size of who benefits, thinking about, what rates relief could occur, particularly over the kind of the immediate term for development. Thinking about kind of forestry and bioeconomy, so again, would kind of, you know, you've probably heard me talk in this space in the past that we think actually, you know, this is a huge economic opportunity for us as a district and broader region. We've certainly got, you know, a huge amount of biomass that kind of sits on our doors. I think all of us, you know, would probably hand on heart sit here and say, isn't it a shame we see all those logs kind of disappear out of the country as a raw unprocessed good? It's interesting, you know, we kind of sit at a pretty interesting juncture at the moment where that resource is going to be increasingly valuable across the globe. Our challenge is how do we ensure that some of that processing activity actually occurs onshore, you know, and what kind of investment regimes need to be put in place to support that. You know, some of the types of things that we'll be looking to suggest in here will be things like accelerated depreciation. Certainly we hear that that's an impediment when you're looking to make a, you know, 100 million plus investment in new plant or so forth. We think that it's definitely worth dusting off some of the previous thinking around special economic zones. You know, they certainly have been used to good effect offshore. Again, how they would get applied domestically needs a little bit more thought. And then finally, the R&D tax credit situation. We do have tax credit arrangements, but certainly they're pretty challenging to administer, and certainly they probably don't drive quite as much of the research that you'd like to see in an advanced economy. The next couple of areas, sort of looking at energy and decarbonisation. So there's kind of three kind of areas that we're kind of focused on here. Grid infrastructure upgrades are certainly one we know is a bit of an impediment at the moment, and trying to kind of match obviously what those long-term plans are for grid upgrades with, you know, where the generation projects are occurring, but also where the use you know, where we're seeing kind of new users come on stream as well. We think there is some opportunities around, you know, the green bonds type space for thinking about kind of co-funding for new renewable projects. And then finally, you know, I think there was a really good article in the paper probably about a week ago talking through the you know, the consenting challenges for a new renewable power station. You know, it takes as long to consent as it takes to build it, you know, and fundamentally we're kind of finding that actually some of these projects they'll get through the first kind of board hurdle in terms of getting greenlit, then it takes so long to consent it that actually by the time they get to construction, the market shifted so much again they've actually got to go back and revisit the entire project. So again, this case of actually thinking about how do we actually do a better job here and how do we make this work a little bit faster. The last significant area, which is obviously starts to touch on some conversations we've had you know, with the regional council on and off around that kind of freight and logistics space. And we think that there is a real need to recognise that kind of, you know, the state highway connection that runs all the way from the south of Lake Taupo through to the Port of Tauranga as a nationally significant corridor, and then ensuring that actually we're starting to kind of bring some real priority to funding those improvements that are required. You know, that captures obviously the discussions around, you know, Waipa, Sala Street and so forth in terms of making sure that that does float to the top in terms of some of that. Obviously when you start to look, there's some pretty big, bold improvements that could be made there, and we think that there are some opportunities to think about PPPs to actually deliver some of those and some sections of that looking out ahead. Kind of alluded to this, obviously councils need to be able to bring something to the table as well. At this point we're not suggesting that we've kind of said anything that, you know, we'll be making a comment, and it's kind of implicit in all the work that actually, you know, any deal in the space is still going to be subject to bringing it back in front of all councils for approval, and ensuring that actually if it steps outside of any kind of current you know, planning frameworks or regulatory restrictions, or so it's obviously outside of your agreed LTP, then obviously you need to approve that. But the types of tool sets, types of mechanisms that we think could be brought to bear in terms of a regional deal would be, you know, thinking around you know, how some rates relief could occur for large-scale developments. So again, this isn't rates relief in terms of anything deducting below what you're already taking. It's probably taking a bit of a haircut on future you know, gains, and just thinking about how that kind of helps to support delivery of the project. We think that there continue to be some opportunities around kind of planning and zoning decisions. I think the key one here is thinking about, you know, the type of leadership and governance that gets stood up to support these discussions as they go forward. Clearly, the work we've done to date in terms of coordinating would require some additional investment. And then obviously we do need to consider making commitment to broader government reforms, things like local water done well and going for housing growth. So again, we're not signalling through this final application that we're stepping outside of any decision made currently by council. Any deal will be subject to coming back to this table if we're selected to move forward. In terms of the actual proposal, gives you a bit of a view. It is a very light touch response. The team are literally kind of beavering away on this at the moment. I'm not going to go through each of those sections, but it gives you a bit of a flavour in terms of how we're pulling something together. It's drawing basically on existing plans and other documents largely, and then really trying to point towards some of these international examples that I've alluded to in terms of the types of funding and financing tools we think would be sensible to utilise. Next steps from here, obviously we're talking to yourselves today. I think I'm presenting to Regional Council tomorrow, and I think certainly with Taupo's obviously this week. We'll be obviously looking to take any feedback from various, from all the groupings and incorporating that on Monday. And then obviously early the following week we're looking to get that proposal signed and submitted ahead of the deadline on the 28th. I think that's us. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Andrew. I'll have a comment from other Andrew over here.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of comments to add. One is just to be aware, so obviously very strong proposal because we think it makes lots of good economic sense. However, I'm also just want to caution everyone on expectations. I understand from the DIA that there are 60 councils involved in some way or another in regional deal applications, and as they said, the target is 1 or 2 this year. Some indication that maybe the new minister might want to do a few more, but it's about starting up a good conversation about how strategic investments from central government and other financing tools land and deliver economic benefit here. The second part of it, I'd say, is certainly the previous minister was very clear about the relationship between two things that appear unrelated, and one is regional deals and whether we are working with other councils on local water done well. So that's been looks very unrelated, but the minister has been very clear that previous minister has been very clear that they're going to be looking more favourably at councils when it comes to regional deals when they are cooperating with the region on water. So I'll just draw that to your attention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just noting the timeframes in the presentation there, Andrew. So I will take questions, but the recommendation is basically for us to just simply note the work that's already been done because it needs this light touch application effectively within 2 weeks. So councillors, if we could just maybe keep the questions confined because we're on quite a tight time frame in terms of what's been, and Andrew's given quite a thorough presentation on the proposals. So I've got a mover here, so I'll just take some quick questions. Yep, I'll take your question then, Councillor Brown and then Councillor Patterson.
Great report, and I like where we're going with this. The question I have is, currently there's a review on the CRIs, the Crown Research Institutes. They're replacing those with 3 public research organisations, so I need to get my head around that. One of them is bioeconomy. It seems to me that piece of work that central government is undertaking sits right over the top of what you're proposing here, and it would be a very easy decision, should it arrive, for some of that to come to Rotorua. Would you agree? Is that something we can push in this process?
Very short answer is yes, and certainly that's probably quite deliberate in terms of thinking about how we're framing the regional deal proposal up as well. There's a slightly more complex answer that I'm happy to take offline. We have been doing quite a lot of work in the space that separately from the regional deal work in terms of thinking about what could happen with the Te Papatapu campus overall, and how that contributes as a bit more of an economic engine for Rotorua. So happy to pick that conversation up separately.
Okay, we can take that at the next CDD meeting when you're presenting, Andrew, from your area. So, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I tautoko Councillor Brown's comments. That was one of my thoughts along the same lines. The other thought I had, and taking on board the CE's comments about this, if it may not actually be the one that's chosen, at least it's a way of starting a conversation and giving them an indication of where we're heading or want to head, and that we need their help to achieve it. One of the things that you may have considered but just didn't include it in the detail was, I can see where Taupo and Rotorua work together well. The angle that I'm coming from is our film industry. Is there any opportunity for tax relief to be included to encourage the growth of our film industry in the Taupo, Bay of Plenty, Rotorua area?
It's interesting because it was actually, film was almost one of the ones we used as an example because they receive a lot of tax relief currently. And so we're almost using that as a comparison to point to actually you might want to consider how you apply that across some of these other, more tourism-related sectors to think about kind of delivering the same sort of outcomes. We haven't, again, we'll probably talk offline a little bit more around the kind of the film space in terms of what the work that we're doing there, but we didn't spell it out directly in this piece of work.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Waru.
Justin, thank you for the report. Like Councillor Brown said, very supportive of the direction and where it's going. Just one question from me. In your conversations, or that you've been having with whoever might be on the other end, has there been any indication as to whether or not partnering with particular groups would be advantageous or not to the deal being proposed?
While Andrew's thinking about that, one thing they have indicated is private sector. So we need to show, and we have been talking about both private sector and iwi entities that have significant interests and plans in this space. So there's a real bias, as Andrew mentioned, rather than talking about the deficit, talk about the upside. So what can drive economic growth? So we probably can't talk specifically about projects here, but certainly the conversation has included what organisations eventually will endorse this, particularly from the private sector and large iwi investors.
Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair, thank you very much for your report, Andrew. Like everybody else, I'm very supportive of this. My only concern is when I saw the first title of this report, I thought I was going to play a game where I'd have a shot every time I see the word forestry. And I'm a bit of a broken reed on this, I accept, because for the last, I don't know how many decades I've been reading newspaper and articles and these sorts of things. I keep seeing that forestry is going to deliver the golden goose. And then the dollar shoots up and suddenly that all hits the fan and, mill closes, etc. like that. So I do just have a concern that we keep sort of, I won't say beating a dead horse, I'm not saying that, but I do have concerns that at some point, I think we have to sort of weigh up what some of these industries have actually delivered long term in terms of profitability for Rotorua. And the one that's missing for me, quite surprising, is dairy. Like, we have a fantastic mill down in Rotorua, high-paying jobs, certainly a main supporter of, that community, being a smaller one, big employer for that. And dairy's missing, farming in general, shall we say, agriculture. Why we're not doing more work to assist New Zealand's golden goose, I'm puzzled, as I have been previously when these sorts of things have been done and dairy's been ignored. So, but just comments, thank you.
Okay, well, he said it was just a comment, so we've got a recommendation here. You've already got those potential sectors there. Councillor O'Brien and Councillor Brown have indicated they're happy to move and second the recommendation. That is that the Community and District Development Committee notes the 4 projects focus areas identified in the regional deal's initial registration and supports the lodgement of a joint light touch proposal application by 28 February. So it's been moved and seconded. Any comments? I think it's pretty straightforward. If not, I'm going to put that. Councillor Lee.
Sorry, just a quick question, if I may. Are elected members going to have a decision to make at some stage on this?
So there will be this is just the light touch application decision point, and I think Andrew mentioned in his presentation, anything further that comes out of this will come back to council.
for decision.
So we need to just kind of get our expression of interest into
Yep,
the government to let them know that we kind of want to be in train for part of this process, so no decisions being made at this stage.
Right, okay, thank you.
So I'll put that motion now. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, thank you, that is carried. Thank you very much, Andrew and Justin, for that. Councillors, we're now going to move into the public excluded section. There are two matters for consideration. One is the confidential minutes of the Community and District Development Committee on the 4th of December. The other is a reappointment of a board member for Rotorua Airport. I've had it moved and seconded by Councillor O'Brien and Councillor Maxwell, I think.
Just
did
a
I
point
see?
of clarification, Madam Chair. I asked before if we had an open and transparent process for the appointment of board members, and we're moving into confidential for this. How does that work?
We are, because we are protecting the privacy of the potential person. If we are going to have a discussion about their CV or their ability to fill this position, then that is not something that we would discuss in a public setting.
So we don't have an open and transparent appointment process?
We do have an open process, Councillor, but this is a reappointment of a board member, and we are talking particularly about a CV of a particular individual, which is, it's his privacy that we are protecting. So I've had it moved by Councillor O'Brien. I think was it Councillor Maxwell that seconded that to move into confidential? Yes. Thank you. I'm going to put that motion now. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against,
Aye.
thank you. That is carried.